Brett, what Petraeus seems to be saying, look, I'm out there, I'm talking to these Arab leaders, it hurts our relationship with them, it makes it more difficult for them to ally with us, they all complain about this. So he's sort of reflecting that ground reality, no?
Well, I think there's some element of truth to that, and it's certainly convenient for our political leaders to make the case that discontent in their country has to do with what settlements Israel might be building in parts of Jerusalem, as opposed to, say, their own policies, Mubarak's repression of Egyptians, repressive policies in Saudi Arabia. So, of course, they're going to blame Israel and not sort of look at their own mismanagement. And when you look at actually the Salafists, the jihadi complaints about the West, of course they include Israel, of course they include the settlements. These complaints predate the settlements. They have a lot to do with long-standing radical objections to Western life as it's carried out in all of its liberalism. I wrote a column saying Lady Gaga is in many ways as much an emblem of the problem that these characters have with the West, with modernity, as Israeli settlements are. And so to essentially say that, well, if we can only solve the settlements problem, we'll relieve ourselves of a large share of the burdens that we carry in the Middle East is preposterous.
Well, but, I read that column, and thanks to them, because I have kids, I actually know who Lady Gaga is. The idea that their discontent, the Salafists, the jihadis' discontent, is all about, the fact that American women are scantily clad. It seems to me it doesn't quite address the issue of America as an imperial power, as a great power in the region, because after all, I mean, Swedish women are scantily clad, but the jihadis don't have anything against Sweden. Of
course, American power and the projection of American power has a lot to do with some of these, with sparking discontent. It also has something to do with damping discontent. In Iraq, America is seen as the key player. The Sunnis are relying on the United States to keep Shiite power at bay. So I'm just saying that it's, I think, uniquely sort of simple-minded as well as convenient to say that if only Israel weren't building settlements in the West Bank or in East Jerusalem, many of these problems would go away. I don't think that's what David Petraeus was saying, and that's why I think it's somewhat unfair to suggest that he was.
Rashid, what do you think? Does it strike you as a shift for the United States to be suggesting that this stalled peace process hurts America's ability to pursue its interests?
What they're saying is that Israel is a drag on the United States. It's not a strategic asset. And this is a discursive shift of some significance. I don't think they're saying, remove settlement X from hilltop Y and the Arabs will sing hosannas to, American power. What they are saying is that Israel is not the strategic asset it was touted as during the Cold War. And we've gone back, in effect, to the Eisenhower administration's view of the Middle East as an area where the United States has problems, and Israel is, in some small way, one of those problems.
Do you see the shift as dramatic as you're just describing? Because what Obama has said and what Petraeus' report says is not Israel as a strategic drag, is that the lack of progress in the peace process is the problem. Mm-hmm. That we need this process to be energized. Otherwise, it is pointed to by jihadis. It is used as a recruiting tool. That's very different from saying Israel is a strategic
I think
threat.
that discursively, if you sit down and parse what they're saying, at base, at root, that is essentially the message. Far from being an enormous asset, if Israel continues to act in a way that antagonizes opinion all over the Muslim world, all over the Arab world, and in other parts of the world, to tell you the truth. You go other places, people say, why is the United States supporting this crazy policy? Then it becomes a liability instead of an asset.
Yeah, but then at that point, if you accept that analysis, at that point you ask yourself, what can the administration do to move the peace process along in a direction that serves both Israelis and Palestinians well? And what the administration has been doing, I think, serves the opposite interest. It basically sends a signal to Israel that this administration is not reliable. There's no longer a kind of a hug me close mentality, which has in fact moved Israel to, for instance, remove its settlements, its settlers from Gaza. It tells the Israelis to hunker down. It tells the Palestinians...
Hug me close led them to withdraw from Gaza?
Yes. Well,
Sharon unilaterally decided on his own?
No, that's actually, this is an important point. What Sharon did is he obtained a letter from Bush saying that in the event that Israel withdraws from Gaza, the Bush administration would not expect Israel to withdraw from all of the settlements, that it would accept the so-called realities.
Famous April letter.
The realities on the ground. That's what allowed Sharon to sell disengagement in Gaza politically to Israel.
I think, first of all, the hug the Israelis and then they're forthcoming is not an argument that you can show a lot of evidence for in the past. I think that the American embrace of Israel has led to decades of standoff. That's the thing I argue in my piece in foreign policy. Secondly, I agree with Brett. I occasionally do agree with Brett. I don't think that this administration is likely to make much progress, and I don't think that they're necessarily going about it entirely the right way. But I think it is actually important for the United States to lay down a marker that we have these or those important relationships with Israel, or we have these shared interests with Israel, but there are also other areas on which we fundamentally disagree.
So why do you
and secondly, I think that it is important for the Israeli public to know that there's some kind of cost for cocking a snook at the United States, which Israeli prime ministers have done since the days of Baker. Pretty much any time an American envoy goes out there, the Israelis slap a new settlement on the ground, open up a new yeshiva in the occupied territories or whatever. Baker actually said, he says, every time I go there, they do something to offend us. And it's been happening systematically for decades. I think it's worthwhile for the Israeli public to realize that the United States doesn't like this sort of thing. And in the past, two American presidents who've made their displeasure clear, President Clinton at the time that Netanyahu was prime minister in '98, and President Bush, the 41, George Herbert Walker Bush, over the issue of loan guarantees, made it clear that the United States had differences with Israel over some things, and the Israeli public in time came around to realizing that maybe these weren't such good prime ministers, that Israel needs good relations with the United States, and that was part of the 1992 election result that brought Rabin to power, and part of the '98 election result that brought Barak to power.
Well, we're not living in 92 or 99 with Barak. I would say to you that the real template is the Camp David Accords of '70 of the Egyptian-Israeli peace. Both Sadat and Begin could go back to their publics and say, we won. I got something from this kind of deal. And the problem is that this administration is trying to balance Israeli and Palestinian or Israeli and Arab interests. It needs to start bonding with both sides. It needs to find formulas in which it can go to the Israelis and say, in exchange for some concessions, we will give you something that you desperately want. And what I argue in a piece in Foreign Affairs is what the Israelis are most worried about is Iran. That is their core strategic security interest. And the United States can give things to Israel on Iran. And similarly with the Palestinians, it also has to change the incentive structure so it makes it more and more interesting to the Palestinians to again accept the two-state solution as the template, which they've been moving away from, to reject Hamas, which is a deal breaker for Israel. It's really a deal breaker in any kind of negotiation, to continue to invest in Palestinian industries. The Palestinian economy is finally rising.
But the core of your piece is basically, as I see it, you're saying, you phrase it more delicately, a strike on Iran in return for the uprooting of settlements on the West Bank.
Seriousness about Iran. And right now we're not
You're speaking like a diplomat. What is seriousness about Iran?
Look, a strike on Iran is a very risky and unfortunate option if it has to happen. There are options that the United States.
What does it mean to be
serious? I think the word we're looking for is catastrophic, disastrous.
Nothing so catastrophic for the chances of peace than an Iran armed with the nuclear weapons, supporting Hezbollah.
You thought that the United States was going about getting to a Palestinian state the wrong way. The Obama administration seems to be suggesting that this is only rumors, but some good reporting, that they're going to present their own peace plan. Presumably this would be some version of the Clinton plan of 2000. Is that a good idea to say, look, there's no point going through the endless negotiations. We know what the end point is going to look like. Let's start there, and some minor negotiations around the issues of Jerusalem and the holy sites is fine, but let's not reinvent the wheel.
Well, again, I'm again in agreement with Brett. His piece in Foreign Affairs talks about how unready Israel in some respects is and how unready the Palestinians are. And in my piece, I talk in particular about the Palestinians. If the Obama administration were to put such a plan as you're talking about, and such has been reported on the table, I don't think the conditions are propitious, and I don't think they've spent their first year in office seeing to it that they become propitious.
What would make them propitious?
One of them is the thing I talk about in my piece in Foreign Affairs. You cannot negotiate with a fractured Palestinian polity. Now, it's not up to the United States to rebuild Palestinian unity, but the United States can stop saying this is a deal breaker if you include Hamas. You have to figure out a way to bring a Palestinian consensus to the table, and that includes necessarily and inevitably Hamas. Brett argues it'll never change. That's rubbish. There are numerous signs.
I was just quoting Khalid Mashal, the General Secretary.
There are many
of Hamas.
things you can quote Mashal as saying. You can parse, again, statements right, left, and center of him, of the late lamented Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, and other people who have been blown away in the past decades by the Israelis, saying quite different things, 100-year truce with Israel, and so on and so forth. I don't think it's going to be an easy thing. But in fact, what I'm trying to say is neither in terms of Israel, where you have the most right-wing, most amenable government in quite a while.
One that includes Ehud Barak.
Nor in the case of the Palestinians, where you have a completely divided polity, is the situation propitious. And those are the kinds of things that I think they should work on if they actually seriously intend to put a proposal on the table.
But isn't it